Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update, number 208 for Monday, the 15th of December, 2025. Just a piece of news. This is the final Monday Market Update for 2025. Thanks very much to everybody who's joined us or watched us or commented us throughout the sessions this year. We're going to take a bit of a well-earned break for a couple of weeks, and we should be back the I think it's the first Monday. I think it might be the 5th or 6th of January. But yeah, hopefully you'll have a good end of the year, and you'll be able to rejoin us for what I think will be an interesting year in 2026. For those of you joining us or watching us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can squeeze in the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within markets, followed by looking at a few charts of interest, and then looking at the live markets. It is not a signal service. There are no trade recommendations. It is just me sharing what's on my watch list, which might be of relevance or interest to yourselves. As always, you are very welcome here, but just remember you're always responsible for your own trading decisions. If you want a little bit more education this afternoon, I'm going to be doing the Active Trades Monday Market Matters webinar at 2 o'clock London time. Today is quite an interesting session. Okay, I'm going to be talking about how to improve your trading using the OODA loop, which is something that has benefited me a great deal in both life and trading. So you're welcome to join me for that. Should you wish to, you can do so on the register on the Active Trades website or use that QR code. And as we move into 2026, I'll only be working with kind of 5 people next year. If that's of relevance or interest to you in terms of becoming a disciplined, effective, consistent and successful trader, then drop me a note if you want to have a conversation about that. All right, let's dig into the main thrust, all right, the main element. So if you're new to trading or new to joining us, this might look a little overwhelming, but the reality is that it's just some clips from my own model, okay, from the own work that I do every weekend, where I'm looking to identify, where is the strength, where is the weakness within the primarily the FX markets, but also the kind of indices and commodities markets as well. So what is this telling us and how do we use it to help us? Well, we are into 51st week of the year, okay, the last full week for the 15th of December, how we're starting, where's the strength and where's the weakness? Well, we still see that Aussie dollar, okay, remains strong, top of the pile as it has been for the last couple of weeks, and it's still joined in second place by the euro there. So that's pretty much holding on as it has done for, as you can see, for the last few weeks. At the other end of the spectrum, Japanese yen, okay, remains still bottom of the pile, even though we've got an interesting week ahead. It's a very busy week, okay? It's the kind of last week of all the central bankers doing a bit of work before they clear off to Gestad or wherever they go these days, etc. But we've got a really busy week, and kind of in terms of Japan, well, what we have is the Bank of Japan, their policy statement and rate and conference on Friday morning. So most people are expecting the Bank of Japan to raise interest rates, okay, and hence why that will be of keen interest. But interestingly, in terms of how that's affected the Japanese yen, there hasn't really been a rush into Japanese yen strength through that, and we'll have a little look at the Japanese yen charts a little bit later on. It's still joined at the bottom with the US dollar. Okay, US dollar's weakened there. We had the interest rate cut last week. And, we drifted lower from that because, there's still an expectation of further interest rate cuts from the Fed next year. But, of course, there is always some debate about whether it'll be 1, 2 or 3. And there are people with far more time on their hands than me to basically go into that and discuss that. Ultimately, I'm just looking to see how does that impact the dollar and how does that relate to trading the majors. And we'll look at that in a moment. Close to home, where's the sterling? Sterling is still kind of, middling along, lower end of the week. We've got a busy week for UK data. So tomorrow we've got the jobs numbers. We've also got manufacturing and services flash PMIs tomorrow for the UK. Then Wednesday we have the inflation, the CPI numbers. Thursday then we have the Bank of England with their MPC official bank rate. And once again, people are still expecting that to sort of, for there to be a 25 basis point, 0.25% cut from 4 to 3.75. But most people are expecting that it'll be about, what Mr. Bailey says afterwards with regards to the sort of trajectory for 2026. And then on Friday morning, we've got UK retail sales. So it's the kind of the week of the month for UK data. And I'll be interested to see where sterling is at the end of this week as opposed to at the start. With a few of the others, Swiss franc has managed to sort of, nudge its way back up there. Okay, I suspect that's probably a lot of it to do with some elements of the some elements of kind of, let's say, nervousness at the end of last week, where we saw issues with which we talked about last week, Avgo, Broadcom, their data, and also Oracle's news as well. That has sent the kind of markets into a bit of a tiz at the end of the week, and that has a knock-on impact in terms of where money flows to. And really, what we see is the rest of the Comdols sort of, taking up the middle of the pack, so to speak. Certainly, with the start of this week, intraday wise, it was much quieter session. Of course, people are sort of just starting to either A, quiet down, or B, they're just waiting for the central bankers to have their say, and then everybody can retire to the office party and forget about it all until next year. But we saw yen, a little bit of that yen strength there, okay, on an intraday basis since we started this week. As I said, yen is still bottom of the pile when it comes to the STAM, and I'll be interested to see how that changes, if at all, as the week goes on. Certainly, when we look at sterling, there's a very mixed picture there for me. Okay, sterling is in kind of a buy environment against the dollar, the yen, and the Swiss franc, but it's in a sell environment against Aussie, the Kiwi, the CAD, the Comdols there. Okay, so it's a bit of a mixed picture there, which we have, to be fair, we have had for a few weeks now, and that just probably indicates the sort of the kind of strength in sterling has come due to the sort of weakness in the dollar and the yen and the Swiss franc, more so than any kind of perceived love of sterling. When we look at indices and commodities, what we see is that, from being where we were all sort of all a little bit worried a few weeks ago, bang, we can see that basically Dow and S&P are back into strategic buy environment, as is the Russell, as is the DAX. They've kind of swung there, and we'll look at those in a moment. ASX still remains sort of tactically short. Oil remains a strategic short. Gold and silver, okay, they are both strategic buys, and we'll look at those in the charts, and you'll be able to see that. The VIX is bullish there as well. And Bitcoin remains sort of bearish, sort of strategic sell. Sort of pivoting around $90,000 at the moment, but we will look at that in a moment. So it's going to be an interesting week. All right, there's going to be lots of data, okay, lots of volatility. I mean, I've just talked about UK data, but there was, lots of data coming out of the US later on this week, all right, as well. So make sure that you are on top of the news flow and the order flow, and you've got a good understanding of what's coming out, because, as I said, it is a pretty full on week, and there'll be plenty for us to get our teeth into. Okay, so let's talk about some charts of interest. This is where I just normally put up a bit of a weekly chart of whether it be a stock or index or ETF or commodity, etc. That is of interest, and you might want to add it to your watch list, or something you can learn normally from when and if I've made a mistake myself. First one, Delta Airlines. Okay, those of you who've joined us over the years will know that I take an interest in aerospace and defense technology companies, and I thought, well, there's been a lot of doom and gloom this year, but let's try and be a little bit positive. This is the chart for Delta Airlines. I've said before, I always have a bit of a soft spot for Delta Airlines, because when I was 18 years old, I did a summer working at Camp America teaching American kids football. And then afterwards, I paid $250, which got me 30 days unlimited flying on Delta Airlines, and literally used that to sort of just fly literally all over the US and also into Canada and Mexico. So I've always had a bit of a soft spot for them, but nonetheless, I'm a trader at the end of the day, and I want to look at where's the opportunity. This is a weekly chart of Delta, and the reason I was kind of interested is that we've had lots of gloom and doom, okay, over the economy and over the transportation. But actually, Delta Airlines has seems to have bucked that trend, okay. And if anything, what we saw last week was that we closed just under the big round number of 70, but that was really the highest weekly close, certainly for this year. And in fact, it might actually be of all time. It might be of all time and stuff. So haven't looked back that far in the charts, but it is a very bullish close. We're around that sort of $70, and the pre-market has us jumping above that on there. So from back here, okay, back with the old Trump tariff tantrums where we really did fall away, we really did find support on that 200 period moving average, which we have done before, okay. And we can see that we've just worked our way back up. And as I said, now I'll be looking at, well, could we finish this year closing above 70? That would, for me, would be quite bullish for 2026. As always, I'll say, I always caveat that, I always like to see how does price react at these significant levels? How does price react there? Okay. If it comes above and then turns 70 from resistance into support and bases there, well, then to me, that is very bullish. But equally, if we come and we sort of start sweeping and then start putting in sort of bullish, bearish rejection, well, it would not surprise me if we drift back to sort of 62, 64 area as well. So I'm curious because we're at that level, and I want to see how do we finish this year, and what does the price action look like over the next week or two. Next one, here is an opportunity for you to learn from one of my mistakes. Okay, I try to be share them as learning points. This is RKLB, Rocket Lab Corporation. Okay, what do they do? Well, the clue's in the name. All right, they are into rockets, and as the space economy starts to grow and as it becomes more, let's say, mainstream, well, then there have been certain small companies that have been able to really sort of take advantage of that. At Rocket Lab, as you can see, this is a weekly chart and has been quite some story, really. Okay, quite some story over the last couple of years, from being down here, okay, sort of $3, $4, $5 ago, up to peaking up once again around about $70 there a few weeks ago. And it's a lot of people are taking an interest, as I said, as the space economy starts to sort of grow and become more mainstream. Companies like Rocket Lab, okay, people are starting to get more interest in them in terms of how often they're going to be launching, right? What's the progress on their kind of neutron rocket, the neutron engine, all right? They will be taking particular interest. The thing with this is, at the start of any kind of industry, it's highly volatile, okay? And you're building rockets, so there are thin margins for error. All right, expectations are high, so either missed milestones or technical issues, as we saw with SpaceX for Tesla, your man from Musk, that can have a huge impact. But I would be looking at this as a bit of a longer term play. But this is where I missed out myself. This is this is an error on my part. In that I've been watching it, I've been sort of in and out of it, sort of trying to ride, as always, trying to surf the waves. We had a really nice pullback earlier in the year to sort of 50 period moving average. Okay, we put a nice bullish engulfing candle and worked our way up from there. And then we started to go parabolic and go vertical. And I always get a little bit nervous when that happens, start taking some off. And then what I was waiting for and hoping was that we saw price fall away. And I was looking at, was this an opportunity for me to get long? But actually, having identified 40 as a kind of $40 as a sort of big round number, I actually thought that we would invariably sort of come down to the 50 here. I thought we maybe sort of took our way under 50 down to sort of kind of the high 30s before we moved, but we didn't do that at all. We put in that inside bar spinning top there. There was me trying to sort of wait for a bit of a better entry. And then you can see over the last 2 weeks, boom, that's what's happened there. We've gone from $40 to 63 in the pre-market. Well done, Paul. All right, nice work there. Okay, so I'm always talking about how it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And that waiting for the perfect entry is sometimes you're going to miss opportunities. And that, as I said, you can see that has launched its way up there. That's been a really quite significant move. And so for me, I will still keep an eye on this. Okay, I'll still watch this because it kind of goes into my interest in, as I said, aerospace and defense, etc. But that's been quite some move. That's effectively over a 50 odd percent, jump in the last couple of weeks. So as I said, you might want to add that to your watch list. Okay, so talking about companies that excite me, here's the exact opposite. Well, no, that's wrong. I'm being a bit harsh there, but those of you who've joined over the years, will know that I don't exactly sort of speak highly about Deutsche Bank. My experiences with them have been rather, let's say, coloured, shall we say? But ultimately, that is of no relevance or importance whatsoever, because ultimately, as traders, investors, you're looking, is there a trend and can I surf part of it? And having been utterly moribund for many, many years, okay, Deutsche Bank share price, over the last couple of years, we have started to see that shift. For many years, it was kind of capped around 10 euros. Okay, this is the US listing here, but that's where we were looking at there. But as you can see for yourselves, okay, this has been in a significant trend. And, we have sort of seen those kind of moves, those moves higher from 10 through 20 through 30. But I'm kind of getting curious about what is going on here at the moment. Is this kind of a bit of a broadening formation that we're building with a double top here as well? In fact, some people might say, well, actually, Paul, that's actually more a bit of like almost like a triple top, a quadruple top, a double top, however you wish to call it. But for some reason, at around about that kind of 37 area, there seems to be resistance at the moment, and it's building a bit of a broadening formation. So, what do we look at? Well, of course, as I said, I'm always curious when I start to see price action here after a good run. Is this a case of people just taking a bit of profit for the end of the year? Or is this, significance of, this has had its run and I'm going to start to sort of roll over into 2026? Certainly for me, what I'd be looking for is, the 20 period moving average has acted as really nice, significant support, okay, over the last year, 18 months. We're still there at the moment. And so I'd be looking to see, well, okay, if the 20 continues to trudge its way higher, well, then I'd be looking to see, well, okay, do we bounce off it again and move above this sort of $37 area of resistance? But of course, alternatively, the other point is that actually, we break it and then we head down to the sort of the lower end of this kind of broadening formation into that kind of 32 area. All right. By which point, will the 50 have closed up, and then we're into a decision point here, just above 30, 31, 32. Does it find real significant support, like perhaps you can see there, and then push our way higher, or does it crack the 30? So it is going to be an interesting couple of weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if it was quiet for the next week or two, but maybe setting up into January. So once again, you might want to add Deutsche Bank to your watch list. And the final one for this week is, well, and for this year as well, is Uber Technologies. So there's a couple of reasons I'm looking at this today. We looked at this a couple of weeks ago, okay, as it was running into sort of earnings, etc., and we were looking at, were we building a very scruffy ascending triangle? Okay, the sort of $100 big round number was acting as real significant resistance there. You can see, we printed like a double top there with a real bearish key reversal engulfing candle, and we were looking, is this, was this squeezing as part of an ascending triangle, and was earnings going to be the catalyst to push us higher? Well, clearly that was not the case. The other reason that I was at it is that I actually had to use an Uber on Saturday night. I was actually at the cinema in Liverpool watching Trading Places, a Christmas movie. I haven't seen that. Well, actually, I've never seen it at the cinema itself. So I was enjoying that, and then the trains all got cancelled, and so I was forced to take the Uber home. And speaking to the driver, he was kind of telling me about how he was asking me how much I'd paid for my journey, and it turned out he got less than. It turned out Uber took 45% of the fare. That's what the conversation was, and I was sort of saying that it was kind of. They were operating as an effective middleman. They're kind of taking a bit from me, clearly taking a bit from him, and that's how they were running a business. So make of that what you will. But technically, what we're looking for is that we can see that, I look at this, you're making lower highs here. We broke that support trend line. We broke the 20 period moving average. We came down to the 50, all right, and we've bounced that. And I look at us now as we're kind of coiling up there. See how we're kind of coiling up there between the 20 and the 50, all right? Is that coiling up for us to basically to turn lower, in which case 80, which has been a significant number, all right, does that become support? All right, and if we crack that, well, then we're going further. or do we break that and then do we finally get sort of pushing our way back up to 100? Okay, 100 is that big round number that you're going to think, is it going to act as a magnet? So I'll be watching that coil up. As I said, maybe we don't get the data maybe we don't get the data this week that basically sort of pushes that move. Maybe we kind of just coil up over the next couple of weeks into the end of the year. But as I said, you might want to add that to your watch list to see how this particularly plays out in the early part of 2026. All right, there we go. On that, let us switch across to the live markets. So if you'll just bear with me for a second, what we'll do is we'll switch across. So just bear with me for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so here we go. I've got an indices profile up here. I hope you can still hear and see me. I've got the Dow on the weekly, Nasdaq on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly, and Russell's on that monthly there. FTSE on the daily, Nikkei on the weekly, DAX on the weekly, and oil there on the weekly. Oil continues to be in quite a significant downtrend. Okay, that's probably giving an indication of people's confidence about certain parts of the economy. Let's have a look at the indices though. So it's kind of we're interesting one, all right, because if we look at Nasdaq, let's just quickly start with Nasdaq. That kind of those sort of the data, the sort of the kind of the work about Broadcom and Oracle last week. It took a bit of a sheen off Nasdaq, and that is that's making a bit of a lower high up that moment, isn't it? We can see that. Okay, there we go. We've kind of working our way up there. Okay, but sort of just falling away down a little bit there, sort of just beneath that kind of the daily 50 in that particular case, in the way that has worked its way. But interestingly, whilst Nasdaq's doing that, well, if we look at Russell, Russell is basically has been working its way to highs. Okay, even though we printed a bit of a rejection candle there, what we look at is that that is very different from Nasdaq at the moment, isn't it? That has been a real significant bounce and a significant move. And is that an indication that there is a rotation going on out of those tech names in towards the sort of, let's say, the kind of the sort of staples, the defensives? Certainly, you might also see that with the Dow as well. That Dow continues to push to those highs, and in fact, that's that is a when you look at that, that is the it's the highest weekly close ever. That is, that's you can't knock that. You always weekly closes are something you want to take a note of and stuff. I genuinely do believe that. So you can see that how interesting how the Nasdaq is kind of struggling, but the Russell and the Dow, they're kind of homes of the sort of the, let's say, the kind of old school companies. They seem to be not doing too bad. And is there something that we can take from that and utilize ourselves? A little bit closer to home, DAX, which we talked about, DAX on the weekly chart, still going sideways, but as I sort of talked about, it couldn't crack that level of support on that weekly 50. So it tips it into support, and we work our way higher from that. And that's what's happened there. Okay, that's what's been interesting to see there. And what we'll see, interestingly, is also kind of see how the ECB with their meeting on Thursday. Nobody's expecting them to cut rates. If anything, people expect them to say that everything's hunky dory, and that actually maybe there'll be some tightening next year. Okay, so I'm curious to see how the DAX will respond to that later on this week. But there for the moment, it has bounced off that support where we talked about a few weeks ago. It's managed to buck off, and actually, bang, you're looking at really that sort of up towards that sort of 24,600 area. Is that going to be a magnet for it? And then even close to home, FTSE. Yeah. So I have been interested to read a little bit of the some of the commentary over the sort of UK economy and some of the budget. The numbers out of the UK on Friday morning were pretty poor. The sort of the sharper wags than me were talking about how we were in a recession already. So that's their new name to describe it. Okay, courtesy of Rachel. And then even at the weekend, I was talking about how actually they're now also talking about we've gone from Brexit to Rexit, which is basically exits based on Rachel Reeves' things, because not only have we got capital leaving, but we've got people leaving the kind of, and a lot of those people are the young, talented ones under 35 who are just basically getting up and go because they can, because they don't see any particular joy in the UK, and all of that's pretty, it's pretty sad and despairing and stuff. But when you look at the FTSE, people will say, "Well, Paul, we're closing out the year at highs. Everything's hunky dory." And yeah, it's been an uptrend. The last couple of weeks, though, have been pretty dull, haven't they? If you look at that daily chart, the 50 is holding. All right, the 50 is holding. But is this just a case now? Now that the sort of the budget's done, everyone's just kind of lost enthusiasm, lost interest. We've just been in that range there. You can see they're not a particularly big range there. 150 pip range on the FTSE over the 15 days of the calendar year, so calendar month so far. Not terribly exciting. Yep, you'd probably still have bullish sentiment because we're above the 20, above the 50, above the 200. But I don't think anybody's terribly excited about FTSE at the moment. There are they? Having a look at some of the commodities. Gold, all right, gold continues okay. I was curious. I thought we would maybe drift lower. I thought we'd come down and test 4,000 again, but nope, wasn't interested. Bull, we want to go higher. We talked about it last week how we were coiling up a little bit, and as I said, I thought we might come down and test the 20, test the 50, test the 4,000, but no, you can see that's when that's what people are interested in. All right, the kind of the whole year has been the uncertainty trade, and when we get that uncertainty, you can see that basically the money just plows into gold there. And silver has been a similar story there. Okay, when we look at it, similar on the weekly chart. I mean, just look at that. Bang. We talked about this a month or two ago, and I was talking about, well, were we putting in a double top at the 50? And I want to see, would the price action confirm that? And it most certainly did not. You can see for yourself, all right, and that's fine. You do your analysis. You can develop a scenario. Okay, if the market does ABC, then I will do X, Y, Z. That's just a tactic. But when it doesn't do that, well, then you just fold up and you have to make a replan. And the replan is that that is long and strong, isn't it? And for the daily chart, that was a kind of really nice bounce there for the 20 to 50, 50, and bang, it's just we've just not looked back since, have we? And so there we are now, just sat. Let me just update that. Sat up above that $60 mark, and I'll be interested to see, do we end the year? Can we end the year above 60? I think that will make some people very happy. I also think that will make some people very nervous, and we'll see how that plays out. And then if we look at Bitcoin, if we look at the dollar, Bitcoin, it's S1S. We're beneath 100,000, beneath the 50. We're in a little bit of a channel. I was looking to see on the daily chart, was this a little bit of a bearish flag that was kind of was being created? I personally think that I'd be more interested in this if we come up to the sort of the 50 and then reject it and move down to 80. That would be a scenario. As I said, there's nothing wrong doing your analysis, having a scenario. I'm not predicting that's the scenario. If price does that, then I'll play it. If it doesn't, well, I'll just carry on my analysis and do it. But that's just me looking at that there. I wonder, as I said, is that a bit of a bear flag building, or does it flip the 50 and flip 100 and form itself as a bit of a bull channel? All right. So, as I said, maybe we'll see that towards the end of the year. Keep an eye on that, see how that particularly plays itself out there. All right. I appreciate we're overrunning a little bit, but there's lots to share with you. As I said, it's the last session of the year. I'll be sending out some emails later and some pieces and content about what you can look to do to help review your trades for the end of the year and start 2026 in the right way properly. This is a dollar profile. So we've got Aussie dollar on the daily, Kiwi dollar on the daily, Euro dollar daily, dollar CAD, pound dollar, dollar yen, dollar Swiss. Okay, and you might even just with your own eyes be able to see what the score is there on those daily charts. It just reflected even more when we look at the dollar index here on the weekly chart. We've had a great trend. We got up to 100 and we just reversed off it. Now we're down at the weekly 20. Will that weekly 20 hold? See how the 20 it's been starting to slow. We talked about it a couple of months ago when it was to see how the 20 was fantastic resistance there, fantastic dynamic resistance until it wasn't, until it flipped. And we're back down here now. Is it going to be support or are we going to flip lower? That's the thing that my eye picks up on. Certainly want to look at the daily chart. we had that double top there, okay, with that's what I call diamonds there, okay, 3-bar breakout, falling away there. We've now we talked about this last week in front of the Federal Reserve meeting, the FOMC last week. Price was coiling up there, wasn't it? Price was coiling up between the 20, the 50, the 200, and then bang, we got what most people expected, and that has led to that sort of weakness in dollar. All right, so we're beneath the daily 50, but we're sat on the weekly 20. So which one is going to sort of win out in the last couple of weeks of the year? Is that going to, as I say, provide enough support, or do we continue to slide through? And so that's where some of this news this week, okay, some of the American news will have an impact upon that. And that is why, as I said, you're seeing, Aussie strength, dollar weakness, which is, Aussie at the top of the STAM, dollars at the bottom. That's what I want to see, strength v weakness. Kiwi strength, dollar weakness. Euro strength, dollar weakness. Canadian dollar strength, dollar weakness, okay. Cable, also dollar weakness, Swiss franc strength, okay, and yen being the sort of interesting one. But then remember, they are both at the bottom of the STAM, the dollar and the yen, aren't they? That is what I would be expecting, ladies and gentlemen. Let's quickly have a look at some of the yen pairs here. As I said, dollar and yen are at the bottom of the STAM. All right, it is. Excuse my language. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the least shit of us all? That is what we are seeing here with that, okay? And that's why we're coiling up there, because they are both at the bottom of the STAM. Remember, my view as a swing trader is I want to be buying strength v weakness. That's what I want to be trading. When you're both weak, there's not a shock, okay, when actually we see the market operating the way it is. You don't need to make this harder than it needs to be. Just, work with what you've got in front of you, all right, and build a plan off that. But otherwise, as I said, considering they're looking at raising interest rates in Japan, when the UK and when the US are looking to cut them, it is surprising to see that we've seen CAD strength, Euro strength, Aussie strength, or even sterling strength, okay, Kiwi strength, Swiss franc strength again, okay. That is all that in. That's just showing us why the yen is bottom of the pile in the STAM. But I wonder, will that change this week? Let's keep an eye on the price action there. And finally, as always, we'll finish with sterling. Okay, finish the session, finish the year. Let's just put these all as it's a bit of a dull morning intraday wise. Okay, on sterling, just a little bit of a trade on pound Swiss and a pound dollar. But let's just bang. So as I said, cable. Well, we've seen that dollar weakness, haven't we? And that's why, we've seen that bit of strength. And, we are sat above the daily 200 and the daily 50 and the 20 sloping up. So, as I said, sterling has benefited from dollar weakness. That is not, I wouldn't say that's a great indication of, any love for sterling. It's just dollar weakness playing itself out there. That's what we see there. And, pound against yen, as we said, look at that. That has been yen weakness much more than sterling strength. But I wonder if whether, as I said, this week, what do we get this week? Keep an eye on that. Where we have sort of had a bit of a mixed message was pound against the Swiss franc, because for most of this year, we have been in a fantastic downtrend. Swiss strength, sterling weakness. We've had a bit of a reversal there, okay, about a month ago, and you can see we've had a bit of sterling strength there. It's come off the last couple of weeks since the budget, but, can we stay sat above the 50? That's the thing I'll be looking at. That's the thing I'll be looking at there. What is the Swiss franc going to do with us? Certainly, bang. When we look at the condols, all right, against it, well, what we've seen this month is, sterling weakness, Canadian strength, sterling weakness, Aussie strength, sterling weakness, Kiwi strength. And that's what we've seen, those condols. It's reflected on the charts. It's reflected in the STAM. That, I don't particularly want to fight that. And to finish off, euro against sterling, we can see, remember, we talked about here, kind of May time, this real kind of pull back into the averages, and we launched ourselves high, and we got up to 87.50, 88, big significant numbers, kind of run out of steam a little bit. But, is there a case of that kind of euro starting to re-exert a little bit of strength against sterling there? Is this a case of, let's just see if I can draw this in. Have we really just been sort of over the last month or so, have we just been really seeing a bull flag in a an uptrend. It's not the most pretty of uptrends, okay, but then they very often aren't. You know, you get what you're given, but you have to wonder: is that a case of a bull flag forming? The fact that we've got price there between the 20, between the 50, it's coiling up. Okay, remember we've got the ECB and the MPC on Thursday, so I would not be taking any big positions on euro sterling before that. And in fact, to be honest, Eddie, I wouldn't be taking any major positions for the rest of this year now. Once that date is out of the way, everyone is just going to lose interest for 2 weeks, and then they'll come back and sort it out in January. But that's what I'd be looking out for there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let us draw it to a close there. Okay, thanks very much to everybody who's joined us, who's helped us, who's supported us. Okay, who's made the Monday market updates work this year. It is genuinely very much appreciated. I've really appreciated the kind of feedback and comments that I've had from people. As always, I hope you have a fantastic trading week. It is a busy week. Make sure you're on top of the news flow. Make sure you're on top of the order flow. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas and New Year. As I said, we'll probably be back. I think it's Monday, 5th of January. Have a fabulous festive period with your families. Take a bit of time off the markets because there'll be plenty to do in 2026. And I will speak to you soon, everybody. Trade well. Cheers.